So the Connected Health and Fitness Summit 2022, I was actually here in 2019, which was run in Culver City. It was the very first event hosted by Kisaco Research, which is a research company based out of the UK. And it was intoxicating. It was one of those events I had to go to. It was obviously a small event, mainly C-suite, so very executive people across connected fitness, which is sort of the breaking new news, based on the old club model. So here we are at the W in Hollywood.
So I wonder why it's not more, I suppose, well known.
Well, I think it's deliberate, to be honest. So first of all, it's C-suite, so it's not everybody. It really is just the founders and the CEOs and the people that are really driving a founding product. There's a big startup feel here, so there's a lot of technology plays, there's a lot of connected fitness that are in their first 1, 2 and 3 years of operations. It really has sprung forward because of the pandemic, so I think digital adoption has been fast forward, and most people quote about 10 years in the 2-year period that we've been in a pandemic. So everyone's gone back to their room, worked on their software, thought about stuff, how do I solve this? And then of course, and a lot of the talk today has been about omni-channel, it's been about hybridization, the fact that we come together for some things and then we have a digital offering for other things. Yeah, it's been really intriguing, hasn't it? And deliberately small. There's been 180 people here. People have the opportunity to speak with most people. If they really want to book a meeting with someone, they can get 10 minutes or 15 minutes.
They decided not to film any of it, so you couldn't get you couldn't get any kind of virtual ticket. What do you think was the reason for that?
I think it was to honour face-to-face. I mean, people were so desperate to come back together, and they really wanted to create an elite, sort of a feeling of specialness. And one of the key themes today has been community. No one showed up in the world like fitness community did during the pandemic. We were there for our people, we were calling, we pivoted online really fast, like all of these things. Now that we're settling and we sort of find ourselves in a very unusual environment, there was triple-digit growth of the connected fitness. Now that the pandemic's levelling off and then people are returning to clubs, we've seen, in some cases, triple-digit decline.
So we did as many interviews as we could fit in a day. What would be one of your big takeaways from today?
My big takeaway is actually speaking to the tech folks that have attended this. So from Microsoft, there's a guy that we met today who's now analysing the wellness space, because in the past it's been, the person who's perhaps doing one of the food brands, or perhaps someone who's doing the mindfulness brand. There hasn't been a person designated around the analytics of that. So I think finally we're on the board, on the table of being an industry that can hopefully become more relevant, because I think we've known from the pandemic, if you take away health and fitness and wellness and healthy choices, we go to shit really quickly. Like, we're alone, we're making bad choices, we're sedentary, and we're not motivated. And that's what our industry gifts. And so we have to get way better at that.
I think for me, it's been that a lot of and we talk about the traditional and the new industry. I've had a bunch of conversations about that as well. There's no doubt that a lot of people that we know, whether it's on the manufacturers or operators side, have had a tough time. It's been very tough, and we're all trying to come back after it. And it's difficult to sort of brush yourselves off and be very optimistic and excited about what's happening, particularly when you're still in the thick of it. But I think it's been great to come to something like this, because there's a lot of new people coming into the space that are very excited and motivated. Some of the people that you've just mentioned there. And I suppose in some ways it kind of gives a little bit of a light at the end of a tunnel to say, look, this is a great opportunity. We've probably all got to think a little bit about doing things differently, but the fact that there's some serious money coming into the space, because there's a great future, and it's probably just more of a reinvention and realigning and rethinking, as opposed to kind of like, all right, it's the end of what we used to know. I think that's a big takeaway. So we've recorded several hours of content. We're going to cut it up and we're going to share it, and it is exclusive content because it's not being put out anywhere else. So you can only get this here, or if you attended the event. So I'm hoping that everyone who's listening will enjoy our conversation. And some of them, towards the end, there was a little bit of wine drinking as well going on, wasn't there? So.
Absolutely, and everyone's available on LinkedIn, so if there are any questions for any of the people that we interview, reach out to them. You know, everyone is trying to solve the big and considerable challenges we have before us that are really created by sugar and sedentary lifestyle and the fact that we're human and we're a little bit lazy. So we've got to be very good at motivating people to move and to make healthy decisions.
Great.
Yeah.
So enjoy the rest of the episode.
Kaumil Gajrawala, a managing director for Credit Suisse, a global investment bank and financial services firm founded and based in Switzerland.
Wellness. No one's been actually measuring wellness from an analyst's point of view. Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct. On Wall Street, we typically have oil analysts and we'll have internet analysts and that sort of a series of different sectors, but there hasn't been somebody in wellness.
So when we see data from, on nutrition or mental health, where's it coming from?
The data comes from all over. We have some of our own data. We also use a lot of third-party data. What we're meant to do is bring it all in and figure out where the best opportunities are in the space. Obviously, there's lots of different ways to look at it, but part of what we saw at Credit Suisse was you had an industry where something like a Peloton was covered by the same analyst that covers a Pinterest or a Shopify. And from the nutrition names, it was covered by maybe a packaged food or a beverage analyst, as opposed to somebody who just looks at all wellness and analyzes how wellness as its industry is evolving, which, as we all know, is evolving very substantially. And if you want to be an investor in the space, this is a very long-term major trend. We felt there should be somebody that offers a way to navigate it.
Great, so give us the definition, like how far reaching is it? Like we're hearing about wellness now, fitness is moving into the wellness or health, and how broad does it go when you say you're sitting across a number of sectors?
The good news about being the only one is I can make as broad as I like.
You're making up rules. Love it.
But if you think about it, anything healthy, active lifestyle, outdoor, it can be fitness, it can be nutrition, it can be mental health, it could be vitamins, minerals, supplements, it can be beauty. So we can get very broad with it, but like most things, we're starting smaller, and we'll look at hardware. So companies like a GoPro, a Garmin that you might not think of immediately within the wellness space, but we think an active lifestyle is a healthier lifestyle, of course, and so something like a GoPro that is used to do outdoor activities, we would say would qualify, or some might think of it as a camera company.
Got it. And then I guess the advantage, or one of the many advantages of this position, is that you're not biased. You're actually calling it as it is. You're not paid to come out with a particular outcome.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I'm just looking for the best opportunities, the best ideas that people can invest their money in. And over time, you're at least looking at a subset of companies where the wind is at their back, because we know, wellness has been something since Diet Coke was launched in 1984. So this is not a new trend. I've been doing consumer for 20 years. It's been a trend that entire time. It's just never been looked at in this way. So we decided to kind of do it, but now was also the right time, because it was like a lot of other trends that existed pre-pandemic that accelerated, whether it's online grocery or video conferencing. Wellness was a trend that existed for a really long time that accelerated. So if you're ever going to bother to do it, now felt like the right time to.
Right, so at some point you got a baseline, you went around and got your data points, I guess. What has been your observation, I guess, of the pandemic? Like what have been the big shifts?
I think a couple of things. I do think, the pendulum, everything is moving in the same direction. The pendulum swings, and you sometimes there's expectations for things to be linear, but they're not. So we saw huge amount of interest in connected fitness equipment in the home, of course. A lot of investments were made expecting that to continue, growth off of growth. We know it didn't exactly go according to plan. It didn't actually change what my view is for the whole space over the long run. It's just you pulled forward a lot of demand. Now you're on the other end of that. So you want to be a little bit careful that the pendulum is on the other end now. That doesn't necessarily mean the whole model is broken. It just means that things happen in a non-linear fashion, which is typical of when you go through a moment like we just went through. I also think the bigger change, particularly with the younger people, is it used to be that wellness was about restrictive behavior. Don't have sugar, don't have carbs, just don't do anything. It was like the old thing in wellness was all restrictive. I don't know if it was 3 years ago or 5 years ago when it happened, but if you look at wellness today, it's a lot more proactive. Give me food that's good for me. What can I do to be healthier? It's gone from really just this reactive to proactive shift, which means the opportunity for businesses is much more substantial, because it's hard to make money when people are trying to restrict themselves from doing things. Now they're looking for what to buy, what to do, what's right for me. How can I adjust it so that it's very specific? Whether it's a technology-based, or the opposite of technology, because outdoor lifestyle is also accelerating in a very, very quick way. So whatever it is for the person, they are very proactively attacking it, which is different from being healthy in the past, which was just about cutting out bad behaviors.
It's great. I was on a webinar the other day in Southeast Asia actually, and they mentioned that a couple of years ago the big trend was athleisure. So this was when Lulu went big, everyone just wore leggings all day long, well, and half the men, but all of the women. So there was athleisure. Then there was probably omni-channel, where we were getting digital solutions and we were getting live, and there was a bit of mix of both. And then they were touting, and it was a guy from McKinsey, and he said, now we're sort of in the era of variety, where I expect to have a number of things. So maybe I have my HIIT workouts, and I have my mindfulness and my meditation, and maybe I have my nutrition, and maybe I have my outdoor scheme as well, where I might go hiking and camping, etc. What would you say? Are you seeing that in the data that you're watching as well?
We're seeing it, yeah, and it is a mix of things. That's why when you ask me how wide-ranging wellness is, it's all of that. I think we're very early stages. It feels unlikely that any time in the next 5 years or 10 years, there's going to be someone who owns the ecosystem, right? Like you've got ecosystem building with Apple, but it took a while before they started with an iPod. Then you had an iPhone, then you had an iPad. The MacBooks had been around, but the journey from the original Mac to where they are now took a very long time. I think that journey probably happens because most industries do consolidate over time, because most industries need capital to grow. However, I don't think it'll happen at a very quick pace. I think there will be people who dominate outdoor active lifestyle in however they do it. Some of that will dominate on the equipment side, others on the tech. It will be a mix of all of these things, but I like what we heard earlier today, the phrase omni-fitness, which I thought was the right way to think about it, because it is a mix of all of these other sorts of things, as opposed to looking at each one of them in silos.
Just on that, just for a second, like it's interesting because I just chatted to the guy Mike from Strava and then Microsoft, and I was sort of saying the way, if you look at a lot of the technology, there's definitely an argument to consolidate all of this information and make it simpler for the consumer. And I guess the ambition of Strava is to be that place, as it would be for Apple Health and a number of others. But what you've said kind of gave me a slightly different view on it, because I suppose it's a little bit like a kind of this mushroom effect, where it seems from coming here that there's this sort of expansion of all these different areas that's still in its expansion phase, which hasn't yet kind of reached its, the end, and then probably at some point the consolidation. So maybe, how long that cycle would take is unknown, but I think, and you probably can answer this a lot better than I, but is it typical that's how markets go? You kind of have this expansion before consolidation, and if there continues to be the requirement for expansion, then that consolidation can't happen as effectively.
Yeah, what's happening is very normal, very natural. Right? There used to be hundreds of auto manufacturers in the United States. There were hundreds of energy drinks, all kind of trying to be their version of Red Bull. And in the end, it ended up being Monster and Red Bull. There were hundreds of cannabis companies, and they still are, but that's also consolidated in a very big way. So whenever you have these big growth segments, you're going to have lots of players. Hard to know who's going to get it precisely right, who's going to be the one that gets all of it, but it doesn't mean there's not lots of people who can make money along the way. I think the difference in fitness, though, is the brand and the trust. If it's rooted in something specific, like outdoor lifestyle, if you're the hiking, biking, camping, it's very hard to get that across to studio-based connected fitness in the home. That's a different thing to do with the brand. Strava is interesting because it gets to sit in the middle of a lot of that.
And he did say that the most popular thing on Strava that he's seeing, because I said, surely I knew you from a cycling company, and he said that's where he started. And he did say now that the big trend is people that are going cycling, doing adventure race, and then doing yoga. So I suppose you are sort of starting to see that happening.
Because they're not one of those things, rather something that puts it all together, they're kind of your consolidator. So it's a different, and they could end up being the one that wins in that game, right? But I don't know if Strava should launch their own cycle. right? I don't know if Strava wants to do hiking boots or something, something like that. But in terms of pulling it all together, because there's so many different things, it's a long way for someone like a Strava to go, right? Even in terms of mindfulness, where it's just measured in minutes. There's things that you can put into there that sounds like they have plans to do, but it's a fragmented industry. There'll be lots of players.
Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code dumbbell. That's escapefitness.com using the code dumbbell. That's it from me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview.
So as you see expansion continue to go and then inevitable consolidation, if you had your $1 million or your $1 billion now, where would you be placing those bets?
Well, if it was $1 billion, I would buy myself a plane.
And stop doing all this stuff.
No, I think actually once you're a billionaire, you can get some people to listen to your podcast. You can, how I made my first billion or whatever it is. But I think you're in the right place if you're starting by looking at the wellness space, because there's so much action, there's so much going on. I also think right now is a particularly good time because many of these stocks, many of these names have sold off a lot as we ended up kind of the exit of COVID, and there was a view that they were big beneficiaries. Now we're in a little bit of a risk-off environment, which is typical of when you have these geopolitical issues, where some of the growth, I don't think people are questioning the growth, but many of these businesses aren't making money yet. They may in 5 years, which is the sort of thing that when you have major stock market shocks, is the sort of thing investors shy away from, right? They want clean balance sheets, they want profits today. That means that right now is a particularly good time to get better than what should be run rate prices on many of the names in the space.
What kind of drew you to this new category of advisor? What do you call yourself? Advisor, investor,
analyst,
equity research.
Equity research.
Right. So where's
For the
your
wellness
passion
sector.
in this?
I think so I spent 20 years looking at the consumer space, mostly in beverages, Coke, Pepsi, Anheuser-Busch, those types of names. So we always knew this wellness thing. Anytime Coke or Pepsi or any of those guys were deploying capital, it was always also in health and wellness. So I know a lot of times they like to get vilified, whatever, but the reality is they're deploying huge amounts of capital into the wellness side. I then was an investor for 5 years across a series of different consumer things, and I'm thinking there's this major trend. There's just nobody to help us out. And when you're on what's called the buy side, when you're an investor, you're looking at so many different things. You rely on experts to kind of help you navigate. And it just didn't exist. And I'm thinking, so if the companies that I'm meant to invest in are spending all of this money in the space, well, then probably I should too. Yeah. And that's when we started designing what we're doing now.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the event? How's it?
Extraordinary. It's really, really exciting, really fun. It's the perfect size where you can network without getting lost, but you still never have time to meet everybody that you need to because you're meeting so many people at once.
Big enough, small enough. Yeah.
Big enough, small enough, yeah. I think it's perfect size. I like that it's quite forward-looking. It's nice having competitors on stage together talking about moving the whole thing forward. There's a collegiate feel here that is that's unique. I've been to lots of conferences. It doesn't always go that way.
And it's a little bit new. I mean, there's definitely been collaboration. We're seeing partnerships happening within the health and the wellness space, but I think there's been a much bigger call for it, especially from really successful leaders who are just basically saying enough. Stop competing on marketing dollars, start pushing the actual health equation forward for everyone, not just the privileged, but for the whole group of humanity, really.
I think they're probably coming around to the most important thing of almost any industry is industry growth. More than, so because I covered consumer staples for a long time, investors in consumer staples spend a lot of time on margins and market share because most of the categories don't grow very quickly. So if your categories don't grow, the only way you make money is taking it from somebody else or taking it from the consumer by having higher margins. But in spaces like this that are growing, what's more important is to accelerate the category growth. I'll give you a good example outside of this industry was, I mentioned a lot in energy drinks, lots of Red Bull is very successful, Monster comes in, everybody goes after it. They're all fighting with each other. Then Coke and Pepsi come to market because they want to have their own. What ended up happening is the category just exploded from everybody getting into it, as opposed to everyone trying to be the next Red Bull. The category itself just exploded. The biggest beneficiaries were Red Bull and Monster. So I think, as you mentioned, the most successful ones are the ones up there saying, let's all get together and push this thing forward. They also have the most to gain, which is the right way to do it, because category growth gives everybody a chance, and they also end up being among the best.
There's another factor too that's happening, and that is in the fitness industry, and Matthew and I have been involved for most of it. It's only 50 years old as an industry, which is very young. And so what we're finding now is adjacent categories start to come in. So we're blending with health, with athleisure, travel, retail, these sorts of things. They have a lot more experience and they have a lot more corporate influence. So you've got a lot more professionalism, and you've got people who can scale products that are truly global. Your background. So we're seeing a lot of those people, and I work in the search space as well. So we're very aware that there's a lot of talent coming from outside the industry into the industry to help grow, to run the big companies. I mean, there was a big call with the recent fall of Peloton. At what point does the founder step away and let a CEO come in who's run a business that's that size with those complexities once it gets past a certain life cycle stage, I guess. So these are some of the things we're observing in the industry as well, as there's names we don't know because they've come from other places, and I think it's a good thing. It's sharing with others, because we're an inherently good business, so we're beginning to all of a sudden attract people.
Yeah, that makes sense. And same is happening on the investor side. Right. Investors want to buy companies that are doing better, that their success, they want to do better by investing in companies whose success makes the world a bit of a better place. And now we have official designations. Some of these companies are called B Corps. You have to apply for it, and if you pass, you're considered a public benefit corporation. Many that are going public are trying to get the qualification before they do that, because those are a lot more capital. We have now large funds that invest just in the wellness space, from very, very large asset managers whose names and are probably have your savings with. We have big funds on ESG, environmental, social, and governance. So you're seeing it even on my end, what you're talking about.
Yeah, and there's a consciousness, isn't there? We look at the millennials, the Gen Zs, they see straight through corporate bullshit. So they are not going to back anything that is not for the planet, for the people, for equality, DEI, whatever it is. So we're seeing that at the consumer level. We're seeing that at the investment level. We're seeing this at an industry level. So there is definitely a hands in the middle and a little bit of a kumbaya moment as people come together, which is good, I hope. And then there's always someone out there for the power and the money and, and all of that.
It'll happen, but it's the natural progression of an industry. It's 50 years old is young, but I would say it's also an industry where things changed a lot in the last period of years. If you think about the biggest miss, in my opinion, is probably of all the governments around the world, is very few of them got out there and said, you can also proactively do things about your health.
Oh, absolutely.
Many of them instead just said, if you get sick, go in a room and stay there.
Stay in there and don't take up a hospital bed.
Where there was an opportunity to really kind of bring that to the forefront and say, we're going to do everything we can on our end, but this is probably more important than it's ever been in your lifetime, and probably more important than it'll ever be in your lifetime, to also focus on your own.
And speaking to Strava, I think that was one of their big trends that has shown their recent even more success than they've had in the past, is getting outdoors, hiking, biking, walking, running, like just the simple bipedal human movement patterns,
Yeah, that's great.
Well, thank you so much. Of course. Enjoyed. We could chat for a lot longer, but we're limited to these sessions, so otherwise we'll go on.
Amazing insights. Yeah, thank you very much. We feel well served, because we're always looking for answers, so we make stuff up.
So where are we going to see you? You're going to be on TV and stuff now, are you?
I have been. I guess I don't. After you guys make me famous, maybe more frequently. But you'll see me around. I spoke at URSA this year or last year. And I attend these conferences frequently, do a couple podcasts here and there, so you'll see me, and once in a while on CNBC if something crazy is going on with one of the public companies.
Wonderful, yes, we look forward to that. Bit of drama.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Our next guest is Trupen Modi, a digital transformation executive of healthcare for the Microsoft Corporation.
Trupen, thank you for joining me. I enjoyed your presentation very much.
Thank you, and pleasure to be here.
Tell me a little bit about, just for the audience, a little bit about what you do for Microsoft.
So I'm a director of digital innovation and transformation. I work with some of the top pharma, retail, health, payer, providers and academic medical centers, and my role is to help them in the innovation transformation space.
Right. So in terms of health, fitness, wellness, what are some of the things that you're able to say? But what is, I suppose, what is Microsoft looking at in terms of that area? Is it the next big thing? What should we all be aware of that's likely to sort of come and happen in this space?
So it's a great question, right? But see, Microsoft is a platform company, right? And like I said in my presentation earlier today, we are the first company in the world to come up with a dedicated cloud for healthcare altogether. It's called Microsoft Cloud for Healthcare. And the intention of the Microsoft Cloud for Healthcare is to really have new and innovative solutions in the cloud that can be consumed by our customers and provide a space where all the partners can come together and bring transformation in this particular space altogether, right? So we look at all the verticals, like I said, pharma verticals, prayer verticals, research vertical, and all of them. And fitness is core and essential part of it. But where fitness truly fits in is more about how you leverage the data that you gather from different sources altogether, like all the sources I mentioned, plus wearables, plus smart devices in the hospitals, for example, through IoMT. And how do you gather this information, understand it, and translate it in the manner that is useful to the consumers, whether it be the patients themselves or whether it be the provider themselves or the peer altogether, right? So when we look at the fitness, it's not just purely about building up muscles altogether, right? It's about your mental health, it's about your physical health, it's about social health, like we spoke about the health equity altogether, the education, right? It's basically providing that kind of all that, determinants that help you improve the health altogether, and that's what we are focused on. If you look at the Microsoft mission, we really want to enable and empower everybody to do more and much better altogether. So improving the health is core to our mission statement altogether, but we are not specifically looking purely from the health and fitness perspective. We are looking holistically to help and support the entire healthcare ecosystem.
Right. When I was looking at some of the slides, and I can't remember whether there was any specific numbers, but it seems as though there's a crazy amount of people creating apps and solutions in this space, and the majority of them crash and burn very, very quickly. A big percentage.
I wouldn't go that far, that majority of them crash and burn. You said that.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
But the chances of, okay, I'll put it another way, the chances of success in that area are fairly slim to really...
So there are two reasons behind it.
Yeah, that's
right?
what I was going to ask.
The first reason is that the applications that are, or the apps that are being created, if it's focused purely on a silo piece of data, the value diminishes over a period of time altogether, right? So to have that connected and integrated data and data asset and the ecosystem and intelligence on top of that is very, very essential altogether. So what you see here, like I said, there are about 1 million plus apps on fitness and health alone in the Apple App Store and the Google App Store, right? But most of them are very silos, for example, right? And they don't sustain, okay? The second thing is digital fatigue. Okay, right. You have so many apps that you really don't know which one to use, which one is valuable, which one is providing the right information, which one is providing the wrong information altogether, right? So what you really also need to do is create a differentiator for yourself, right? In the sense that you're providing the rich consumer experience, which is where the trend is going on. But also the consumer needs to find credibility and value in the information you're providing them altogether. So for all the new apps that are coming up, they really need to understand these two aspects very crisp and clear. Like in the last panel discussion we had one panelist talking about the genomics, one panelist talking about the nutrition, and one panelist talking about the gym and the fitness stuff, right? The reality is that if I were to use, I need all three of them. And no one is going to meet my needs, if you will, right? And the measure of success has to be based on how I improved my health versus how you were able to deliver the data to me altogether. So that's how it needs to really evolve in my point of view altogether. And we are getting there, right? Meaning healthcare is just picking up the disruption in the market altogether and transformation. So it will evolve and you will see more and more integration happening down the line altogether. And part of the problem also is that the data integration in the clinical space is not as easy as any other organizations or any other field altogether. So there's huge amount of investments required to make this thing happen altogether. But that's a long answer to your short question, but it's a combination of both, right? Like I said, to summarize, one is the integration, making sure the right data is being put together to deliver the value, and then providing that consumer experience for that, to be the differentiator in the market is what is needed.
So for people that are thinking about entering this space, are there things that you've seen or noticed that are almost like a best practice? So to be successful, should we, before we go outside of those things that you've said, identify how you're going to differentiate yourself, but is there anything else that's really important to enhance your chance of kind of being successful?
Use AI, artificial intelligence.
Really?
Right? So what I mean by saying this stuff is that creating the rich digital front door as part of consumerization, yes, sure, it will catch an eye altogether. But what now the smart consumers are looking for, not only the historic data about yourself, but also being able to predict what the future would look like for them, whether it be on the fitness perspective, whether it be for the weight gain perspective altogether, and how to alter that altogether, right? And the same information is also useful for the providers altogether. And this technology already exists, if you will, right? Those are the kind of things that's really going to help you be successful over there. If, let's say, for example, I'm recording my steps daily, okay, and seeing that if I can meet the requirement of 10,000 steps daily. Sure, that's useful, but that has been existing for the last 5-10 years in Apple Watch altogether. What's new about it? So if you look at Apple, and they're doing really cool stuff at that stuff. Now you can do ECG as part of your app. Now you can do oxygen level. They're also looking at potentially monitoring your glucose level altogether and what it could look like in the future, right? So what you have to think about is what is it that you can do above and beyond what Apple is already doing for you to be successful, right? So that's where AI, predictive analytics, and all of this comes into the picture altogether. It's not easy. It's not easy altogether, but that's where I would put my money, if you will.
Yeah. And my, I suppose, challenge as a consumer, I'm wearing an Oura Ring, I've got my levels, I have my MyZone belt when I'm working out. So there's all these different, very successful single channel solutions. And when I listen to what's happening here, as you say, there seems to be this integration, and people like Apple and I suppose Microsoft are the ones where all this data's funneling in.
Yes, Microsoft does that a lot, yes.
How do you see the future, without saying anything that you shouldn't be saying, but where, because I suppose my view of the future is someone like an Apple or a Microsoft will probably do all that for you, and you'll have it, whether it's in your glasses or a phone or a device, and that will be the central point. And so I suppose these individual companies that make some of these probably will be owned by one of the larger brands that can manage that.
No, but that's part of how the capitalism works altogether, right? So see, the difference is Apple is more of a device company, right? They do a great job. When we look at the platform companies, meaning there are many platform companies, but the big ones are Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, right? So all the startup companies, by and large, over a period of time, becomes part of a particular ecosystem once they reach to a point of success altogether, whether it be selling off or whether it be acquisitions altogether, or they disappear as a matter of fact, right? And there are very few startups that really disrupts the market altogether, and looking forward to that happening that also, right? So, there's no real black and white answer to this stuff, right? Basically, the different business models will succeed over there, right? What we really also don't want is that, the big companies completely monopolize the healthcare altogether. So there is a little bit about innovation that happens in the small startups that doesn't happen in the big companies altogether, and that should retain and will remain altogether to transform the industry But there is no right or wrong answer to this stuff. It just kind of organically evolves, and the companies that we, for example, feel are right for our vision and strategy, Microsoft acquires them, like Nuance was one of them, right? And so does the other organizations, but we don't go out and acquire every single company that starts up, right? So, sorry, meaning I don't know if there is a right answer for that stuff.
No, it's a difficult one, but I certainly see being able to either and even translate that information as well. It's like everything comes in and then you can make recommendations, but unless you've got your sleep, your heart rate, all these different touch points, it seems that you're only getting a part. You're not getting a complete picture of really what you need to do, are you? In a lot of cases,
you don't.
So, as someone who's not probably traditionally from the fitness space, I heard your story, and congratulations on losing all that weight, by the way.
Well, I gained another 5 pounds. I need to lose a lot more weight than I have, but thank you.
So with a your tech head and your experience of fitness and going through your own fitness journey. You know, if you were starting your own business again, like, and coming into this fitness space, like, what sort of problems would you try and solve?
I would not necessarily approach from the perspective of solving the problem.
Okay.
Right? I would approach from the perspective of how can I empower human beings and stop them from becoming patients altogether, right? So focus more around the preventive and proactive wellness rather than the management of the illness once sets in altogether, right? So what I mean by saying this stuff is that, from the childhood itself, for example, we don't get enough educated on being healthy and living the healthy lifestyle altogether. Going all the way up, I'm going all the way up altogether, right? Second thing is actually empowering them with the right tools and capabilities to make the right decisions, right? I really want the consumer to own their own health altogether. How can you prevent that? Chronic illness, I give an example about this stuff, right? It's absolutely preventable by most cases, meaning if you have gene issues and stuff, there's nothing much you can do about it, right? But by and large, chronic illness happens because of stress, because of obesity, because of lack of exercise, loneliness, right? All of this together, and all of this is preventable, like many, many ways above and beyond, the traditional means of providing pills altogether, right? So that's what I would typically invest money. Like, how can I actually empower consumers, whether it be from childhood to being a complete adult, where they can start owning their own health altogether.
Fantastic. Trupen, thank you so much for your time. Love your talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Michael Horvath, the CEO and co-founder of Strava, the social network connecting millions of athletes through the sports they love.
So Mike, thank you for joining us for this short interview at the Fitness Technology Summit.
Yeah, pleased to be here. It's really great to be able to talk with you.
So tell us a little bit about what you do for Strava.
Okay. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Strava, and we started the company in 2009 with the mission to build something that connects athletes, connects people who want to be active with each other, so that will help them find the motivation to stay active.
Right. And I've heard about Strava, and I feel quite embarrassed that I'm not on it. I've got the app, and I've not used it.
Well, there's our opportunity. I can get you signed up, right?
And I hear that you've got 97 million athletes, and it's growing at 2 million a month. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that's right. And it took us a while to get to that. As said, we launched a while ago, and one of the things that we've always relied on is that word of mouth growth. So the bigger the community gets, the more that people talk about it, and the faster it grows. And so it took a while to get here, but we look forward to continuing from now.
Yeah. How do you get that growth in? In your session, you were talking about the traditional marketing doesn't work in terms of ads, and you're competing against people that are selling bikes and all kinds of stuff. So what have you, for someone that's sort of getting into this business and trying to build their own app or fitness thing, how have you found to be successful in that space?
Yeah, so we started with focusing on engaging the customers who found their way to Strava. So something got the first few people onto Strava, and we really tried to build an experience that kept them there. And if we were successful, then we counted on them telling their friends. So that word of mouth as the best way to do growth. We saw that throughout Strava's history is that's the best source of growth. But to do that well, you need to focus on keeping the people who find their way there in the experience. So where does engagement come from? It comes from building a joyful experience, something people like to use. They get a lot of enjoyment out of using it. They're more likely to do it again the next time, and then the next time. If you build habitual use, I'm talking like 2 or 3 times a week, you're using this product, this app. All of a sudden, you're talking to your friends about it. You talk to your friends about the stuff that you find meaningful in your life. And then you've got that great relationship with your customer. They're helping you bring the next set of customers in. Your community grows, and then it all repeats again. And all of a sudden, you're 97 million athletes growing 2 million a month, right? So it takes a while. It's slow until it's fast, but then you get there. So
it must be very difficult because you're really focusing on quality and and value, and without that, it's almost like, look, the market is going to prove how well aligned you are with that goal.
Yeah.
What you talked in your session a little bit about kind of your team and priority and focus, getting people to focus in the right areas. How have you led the organization with your team to get them to focus on the right areas and to be able to decide the areas that you shouldn't focus on?
That's a great question. And we've lost our way a couple of times in our history. You know, we've been around long enough that we've made as many mistakes as we've made the right moves. The first thing we start with is, in our case, is who's the customer? The customer is the athlete. It's the person who wants to be active. That's who we serve. If we start there, usually we get to a good answer. It may not be the best answer, but if we don't start there, we'll get to a bad answer. And that's when I say we lost our way a few times, is when we said, well, maybe we should be building Strava for this other customer too, like maybe it's the event organizer, or we build it for the company that wants to use Strava to advertise the gear they sell. Then we're not going to keep that really great relationship with our athlete community where they'll tell their friends about Strava. So if we start with who's the customer, it's the athlete, then we have an equation of Strava. Athlete awesome equals business awesome. You build stuff that the athlete loves to use, is willing to pay for, and tell their friends about, guaranteed it's going to be great for your business. And so if we follow those two principles, who's the customer, and build for them, build something awesome for them, good things will follow from that.
In terms of monetization, how and when did you decide that this great idea of value and serving people could make money, and how did you choose? Because there's a number of ways that you can go about doing that. How did you choose ways that were in alignment with your own values?
Yeah. So we had some basic principles in the beginning. It's like, we're not going to build an ad platform. We wanted to build a subscription business. Why subscription? Well, it's like we want to have a direct relationship that our revenue comes from the customer we serve. So if the customer is the athlete, then if we're building something of value, they should be glad to pay us. And it was almost like, well, if they're not, well, it's on us. We got to build something that they're willing to pay for. And so we've worked at it, and we haven't necessarily, again, just like we learned through both doing good things that work and we reinforce them, and also from making mistakes and being willing to acknowledge their mistakes. Give you an example, we back in 2018, we broke the subscription into 3 modules, 3 packs, we call them, thinking that would be, they were lower cost than if you buy the whole thing, and that way people could tailor what part of the subscription they really want. It was incredibly confusing to people. They didn't get it, and they didn't know what they wanted, and so we made things worse, but it took us until 2020 to take the packs away. We should have realized that really much earlier and just said, look, that didn't work. Great experiment, but move on. You move to what you learn now is that they value the whole bundle. And had we done that, our business would have been stronger today if we'd done it sooner. But the good thing about having a subscription business is your customers then get to decide every day, are you building something of value? And if you're paying attention to those signals, you can build a great business. So we're thankful for those signals when people tell us it's worth it and they pay us, and also thankful if they tell us, look, we don't get it, I'm not sure why we're paying for this, and we'll make some better changes because of it.
For those people who don't know and have not experienced Strava, how would you define and describe it today? And is that different to how you defined and described it when you first set off on this mission?
Well, I think the principle is still the same, but we didn't have the words to say it back in 2009 when it was just a handful of athletes around, using the early version of Strava. Today, Strava is the place where you can build a community of people who you care about, who also love to be active, and through being connected to them, you're going to find more motivation to stay active. People motivate people, and that's really the simple principle of the user experience. By seeing their activities every day, commenting and kudoing on their activities, you contributing yours, you're encouraging each other to do what you already know you should be doing, which is getting out, getting some movement. Your movement belongs on Strava, and we celebrate that by allowing you to connect to those people you care most about. And back in the early days, we tried to talk about this and that, about what we were trying to build, but that's fundamental thing is it's just really the community that you build. That's what keeps you active.
So a couple of questions to wrap up. So after going through that journey, I suppose, what would be the one big takeaway that you've learned about going into business in an app business? We had the guy from Microsoft on earlier, and these are not his words, but there seemed to be a massive graveyard of people that are trying to create the next latest and greatest fitness app. What have you learned? And I suppose what things, if you did it again, would you probably do differently?
Yeah. So one big learning, I would say, is that technology is very important to make this work. Technology is sort of like there is a foundational layer of tech, and the digital aspect of it is what makes this different than something that you couldn't have built this 20 years ago. In fact, we tried. It didn't. We got told it was a bad idea 20 plus years ago. But technology can't be the thing that you get people to buy into. They have to buy into something they can actually feel like it's in the background. I know it's there, but I don't actually know how it works, and that's good. If the technology is really the front and center thing, whether it's a device or data you're collecting, it's not going to fit into the way people's lives are, which is they want it to be something they can forget about and they just count on. So I think we definitely have gotten that wrong sometimes, and I think that when we get it right is it enables things. It's additive to people's lives as opposed to being the front and center of their life. So
there's some interesting technology that's being talked about here, and there also seems to be this convergence of data and being able to consolidate a lot of this information. As a company that I suppose is, I guess you are the market leader in what you do at the moment. Where do you see your business going, and also, I suppose, similar apps like yourself? Do you think there's going to be a consolidation and the people like the Apples and the Microsofts will eventually sort of buy people like yourself and roll it into what they're offering, or do you see that there's still an interesting space for a lot of these independent companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. So where I see Strava going is we want to bring joy to 1 billion people this decade. We want to get them into the community, give them the experience of what Strava can mean in their lives. If we do that really well, I think we'll have built a really long-standing, dependable, resilient business. We want to do more for those athletes. We want to be able to help them, connect with the community and give them motivation to be active, help them discover what's great about the world around them to be active in. And then we want to expand how we can serve them with things that they also need. For example, what are the peak moments in their athletic life, the events they do? What about how they live in terms of nutrition and what supports their active life and sleep and wellness? Those are all things we can do with partnership with other companies. Sometimes that means we could be the acquirer, but also it's more that how can we be a great partner to help others build a great business. As to the independence of Strava or any company that has those aspirations, I believe there will be a company that motivates the world to be active. There will be a company that gets people moving. We have not seen that company yet in the modern age. We want to be the #1 sports brand of the 21st century with technology, not with shirts and shoes, the way that the 20th century companies did it. We want to get the world moving and keep the world moving. That's our aspiration.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Really a pleasure talking to you.
Our second guest is Ali Mostashari, the CEO of LifeNome, a precision health AI company headquartered in New York.
So, Ali, standout presentation on the panel. Let's hear a little bit about your business, because you very strongly come from the science side and you work with a lot of smart people, and we're really beginning to personalise in the world. So perhaps just unpack some of the things you spoke about today.
Sure, absolutely. So LifeNome is a company that was created by 3 scientists, myself, my co-founder Dr. Rhian, and my co-founder Dr. Mario Storga. It's interesting because each of us are in the top 20 cited scholars in our field in the world. It's very rare for businesses to come together when scientists get together. There's good things about it and there's bad things about it. So the bad thing is basically among the 3 scientists, they decided that I'm the least nerdy, so I'm going to be the CEO. And the problem, of course, is we get really amazing science, but we're not really good at marketing or not good at, all sorts of like schmoozing or stuff like that. So we're kind of more focused on the science side. It's also an interesting, very, very multicultural background. Like I'm Iranian American, my co-founder Rhian is Russian Israeli, and my other co-founder is Croatian. Like if you think about these different backgrounds, usually like all of these working together is really not something that you get, but we're all focused on improving health and well-being for the population. The premise of LifeNome is that a one-size-fits-all to healthcare and to preventative health is not the right approach. There is the area of precision medicine, which focuses on drugs and how to personalize drugs for people. But that's once you are already sick. What we are kind of focusing on is if we tell you about the blueprint of the body that you have something that you have to work with, which is your body, and then you have something that you have to work with, which is your behavior, and then you have a physiology of the things that you've done so far, so the physical karma that you carry basically up to this point, and now what do you do with all of this? So if you get all of this data, what is the path forward individualized for you rather than something that's kind of a one-size-fits-all approach? And because we're looking at health as an integrated phenomenon, we don't say we just work on nutrition or we just work on fitness. we think about all the different aspects. Again, in the session I talked about the objectives of integrated health being maximizing longevity, maximizing vitality, both physical and spiritual and mental health-wise, and maximizing community, because that's how humans grow. So within communities, in the structure of belonging. And basically, and the question is, how do I do that given the unique situation I'm in? And that includes my biology, includes my physiology, includes my behavior, includes my environment and the locations I'm in.
So that sounds really cool. And I was talking to you as we were walking up about my levels monitor. So I'm a very simple person, and I understand like things you attach to your body and I guess senses. So sounds like you get a huge amount of really key data. How do you get that, and then where does it go, and then how do you sort of give that back to someone? How do you personalize it? Explain the sort of roadmap a little bit.
Yeah, so for the average user, they shouldn't be kind of confronting the complexity of things. So for a DNA test, in order for your DNA to be tested for more than 500 different markers, the only thing you need to do is to swab your cheek for 30 seconds with a swab, and you send it back to a lab. And that's as much as work as you do. And then what results from that is not just a 500-page report, but it's actually, okay, here's the best exercises for you. This particular exercise is better than the others. Here's the best recipes for you. Here's the best. So you just get the outputs of what's the best intervention for your particular need. And then we will tell you also why that's the best intervention for you. And basically we say, because of your genetics, here are the things within your genetics which make this a better intervention. Here are the things within your wearable device feedback. When we have people wear the wearable device for 7 days, and we understand their sleep, we understand their heart rate patterns, we understand their heart rate variability, we understand their activity level, and based on that, the recommendation then is not, okay, so now run 35 minutes. If the person's heart rate went up after 2.5 minutes to 140 above the target heart rate, we're not going to tell them, okay, now why don't you do this or that? So this becomes a more dynamically changing. We will look at the person, how they grow, and we grow with them. We provide them with much more personalized interactions. What the person sees is just the personalized content. Right. And that's very important, because if you think about content today, we're bombarded with content. Yeah. There are thousands.
Well, there's so many wearables: your sleep, your glucose, your heart rate. So are you pulling that together with a wearable and a swab? Right. To give you the
for now, but we actually feel that in the future, because the DNA, for example, the DNA data does not change over time. So it's a very easy thing to do. In the future, it might be that many countries right now are having their healthcare systems do this for the entire populations. For example, the United Arab Emirates just decided to sequence voluntarily every single person for free, because they know their healthcare costs are going to be a lot lower if they know what disease risks people have versus whether they don't. And we are, again, LifeNome is in charge of analyzing that data for the entire UAE population, right? So, and this is the thing that in the future, and within the next 10 years or so, we're going to see how the different data sets are going to accrue, where you don't have to redo it every time. You get a centralized depository of your data, secure, in a blockchain, basically secured profile, where other than you, nobody else can actually see it. And the personalization occurs using an AI that is kind of fair instead of biased, meaning that instead of telling you someone paid for this content to be on a higher level, so you're going to get that recommendation, it actually tells you, here's the recommendation because this is good for you, this is the best for you, given all the different options. So it's an interesting way of democratizing health and making it more fair and making it more equitable and making it more authentic. And still, all brands will benefit from it, because over time, they will have to produce better outcomes, better content. Once they see that their initial content may not be as useful as used by people, they will be incentivized to produce better outcomes. So it's going to be a win-win.
When you say
situation.
brands, is this something that would be the back end for other brands and popular apps?
Yeah, okay. So we are a B2B company. So what we do is we do the analytics. We work with the major nutrition companies and fitness companies and beauty companies and healthcare companies in the world. We work with the pharmaceutical companies such as like Abbott and AbbVie and others. We work with nutrition companies such as Nestle and Campbell and others. We work with fitness companies. So it's basically insurance companies. So anyone who wants to improve the health and well-being of their end users and reduce their overall health risk would take our solutions, create a particular solution for their own end customers, and produce it.
Great. So speaking of equitable, and you join us on International Women's Day
Yes.
around the world, we had a very spirited discussion around the absence of female science and data. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so something that, of course, everyone knows is basically a lot of the science that leads to, in particular for chronic conditions, is based on white male data. And still a lot of medicine is focused on that, and a lot of the recommendations are focused on that. And what's changing now is more science is becoming available, where we're looking at what are the pathways for different kinds of diseases, for different kinds of well-being impacts with regards to women versus men. So right now, most companies that are more credible are now separating their data sets. So for example, we have a data set of more than 500,000 people, and we separated based on male and female, and then the models that we use by AI to predict different kinds of diseases is quite different between the two. The markers we take into consideration are very different, and that's where the science is going to be going. What's pretty much, as I said in the session, a shame is that 50% of the population gets really 20% of the attention in terms of the scientific impacts of things. So we don't have enough data a lot of times for many diseases, for many well-being interventions to see what works for women, and particularly also in addition to women of color, people of different backgrounds, diverse backgrounds that are not necessarily overrepresented.
And that was one of the big things that came up in the personalisation talk, wasn't it? We are further personalising for white, fairly well-heeled people, because that's the data sets, and that's not going to help us solve worldwide issues of the underserved, the underprivileged.
Absolutely, but what's interesting is, for example, we are in LifeNome, we're working with researchers in Africa to create data sets of the sub-Saharan African population. And what's interesting is, despite there are some interesting things that happen with technology that are quite fascinating. So for example, genetic testing is something that may be considered a luxurious thing, and we might think that people in Africa could not do that. But what's interesting is pharmaceutical companies and other government agencies, because of the Ebola crisis, sent thousands of genetic testing machines to Africa that can now be used not for Ebola testing, but for nutrition testing, but for exercise testing, but for disease testing. So a bit more innovative solutions where, the same thing that happened to mobile phones, where mobile phone adoption in Africa was faster than that in European countries because they didn't have the landline infrastructure. The same thing is they don't have the legacy healthcare systems that we have here, which stop us from changing and being innovative. A lot of it can be just, you can come and jump and not have to go through the dysfunctional one, but go through a more personalized health and well-being approach. So I think there is the opportunity as the technology becomes more accessible and cheaper. I'll give you an example. The first human genome costs around $50 million to sequence, and right now we can get like a partial human genome sequence at around $30. So the difference between $50 million and $30 is extensive, and in the longer term, if it costs $10, then pretty much everyone on the planet can afford it, or there's going to be someone who can pay for that, and that's going to be useful.
How do you you have these inputs and you collect this data, and then you then make recommendations, I suppose. So how do you how can you see those recommendations being made that are, I suppose, because like even from when you look at diet, nutrition, exercise, some of the research just isn't there and it's not funded enough. So how can you sort of keep that as pure as possible so that you're not actually feeding back things that might not be that well thought through?
So some things that there's always that issue with regards to data, and right now we have more data than we used to before. So one thing that's quite interesting, and that is, for example, the UK government paid around £6 billion for a project called the UK Biobank. And that UK Biobank is immensely valuable right now in generating new science because it followed people over 20 years looking at what they ate, what their genomic data was, what their wearable data was, what their lifestyle was. And that is an amazing treasure trove where we can actually see, here are the people 20 years ago, here's the choices they made. Based on those choices and their genetics, they ended up in 3 different categories. These are the people who chose this kind of approach, and here's where they ended up with regards to disease, and here's how the others ended up. So what's interesting is government-sponsored research is now allowing hundreds of commercial entities to produce results and produce products that are useful for the public at large. And this is very, very important. In the US, we have the All of Us project that the NIH is doing, which is the equivalent of the UK Biobank, and it's going to go further by actually looking at very detailed nutritional interventions to see how different people react to different kinds of diets, how different people react with regards to behavioral changes, with regards to adherence, with regards to everything, taking into consideration not just biological data, but also social data, economic data, urban data. Is this person in the rural area, in an urban area? What are their backgrounds and everything else? As we're going forward, more data is being created, and that data is becoming more diverse and more representative. We're still not there yet, and absolutely. So what we always say is we're providing the recommendations based on the best available science. And we also say what that best available science is. So how representative is this particular data set that we have? And we try to be very clear about that.
Right. What's next then? Like where does this, for someone who's on the cutting edge, and you're probably a million years ahead of where most of us are, like where do you see this going in? And I suppose, what does that mean to the man and woman on the street, in terms of what this technology?
So our goal is really to mobilize lots of different actors to come together to work together for health and well-being instead of competing together. What I was discussing in the session was that many brands, many companies spend hundreds of dollars to acquire individual users away from each other instead of spending that money on actually improving healthcare for the people. So if you think about the amount of money that goes into marketing and in order to get a customer and kind of grab them away from others, if we had a very different market approach, let's call it ecosystem capitalism, where you actually say, our goal is to improve the health and well-being of this person as an end goal, and each of us have a piece of the puzzle, and we will charge for the piece of the puzzle that we're really good at, but let us just charge for the thing that we're really good at. And then together, we can actually achieve a lot more. There were companies here who came and they're working on computer vision. We have companies that work in nutrition. We have companies who have amazing fitness content. None of these individually is going to allow a person to live a full, healthy life, but all of them together can do a lot. And what we can do, because we are a company actually that cannot compete with anyone, we're an AI data company. We need everyone to come together. Because of this, and because of the fact that our agenda is very clearly a collaborative agenda, we're able to bring brands together that usually do not work together. And that's what we're doing right now. So for example, we right now have a massive project with LG on which to bring a platform, a precision health platform, that allows the personalized health and well-being on the nutrition side, on the exercise side, stress management and sleep, on smart TVs as a default to the close to 225 million households that are going to have smart TVs by 2025, bringing together content from hundreds of different providers and devices from hundreds of different providers, all in an ecosystem structure that is more like Netflix, where you basically, a person pays, let's say $19.99 for an entire family for preventative health, and they get access to everyone's content, and everyone gets compensated as their content is used. So this makes it very different. People basically, everyone comes together and they distribute the money that's being made, but then they don't have to acquire users for $150 because we're now all acquiring users together. Our goal is then the improvement of the final outcome for the patients or for the individuals.
Fantastic.
Great.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you so
awesome.
much. That was very interesting to see where things are going, and I didn't realize there was so much, I suppose, data out there already that can be
significant amounts
tapped into.
They're being provided. A lot more is being created every year.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Great to
Thank
see
you
you.
for the time.
Thank you. Yay.
Thank you.
Rhian Collinson, the managing director of Kisaco Research, who organised the event.
Rhian Collinson, all the way from England.
Hey, all the way from England, all the way from England. London.
Thanks very much for inviting us to the event and kind of allowing me to crash your little gig. And to Emma for also arranging that. So tell us a little bit about what this is about and the reason that you put these events on.
So we ran the first event ever for the fitness industry in 2019, and then obviously for 2 years we have been...
I was there, not at a nice hotel like this, I have to say.
No, it's much nicer this year.
Much nicer.
Obviously pandemic hit, so we did quite a bit virtually, but I think there's no better way for this industry in particular to come together face to face. Like, it's so great to see everyone back. And this was all about covering not just traditionally we were focused on the boutique gyms and really looking at that sort of explosion of boutique, but I think the industry has really changed over the last 2 years, hugely accelerated by the pandemic, been through a mass digital transformation, and I think there are more and more parts of the market that are becoming integrated with the fitness space. So fitness, I think, is just one pillar of health, and I think that other areas like sleep and nutrition, mindfulness are becoming more and more critical. So we've really tried to incorporate all of that into the 2022 agenda, not just with the content, but with the people that we've got involved in the program and also the attendees.
So tell us a bit more about those. So tell us about like who's come, how many, where have they come from?
So we've got about over 180 attendees, a complete mix from a big group from the US, but also we have attendees from Chile, from Europe, from Germany, and I would say predominantly C-suite founder level, so a really high level representation of the industry.
You know, I have to say the conversation's been at that level. The questioning today, I mean, let's perhaps talk about today. We're on day one of a 2-day event. So what have been some of the highlights for you? Because we've got panels, we've got presentations, we've got meetups.
Yeah, I think even just the variation of content this morning. So we had Strava, like a huge digital player, the founder opening this morning.
97 million subscribers.
Absolutely, and he was phenomenal. I think just really talking about the role of Strava in people's health and lifestyle.
And bringing joy. Like he talked a lot about joy and getting into people's habits in a sustainable way, and he wants to be there their whole life, not just, you know, the fitness thing from a particular age.
So the whole holistic health, you know, it's sort of helping people in their health journey. And then we also have Microsoft involved, so it's really great to have some of the tech players here who I think are getting more and more involved in the health sphere, particularly the connected health. We also have attendees from Intel, so it's really interesting to see that injection of tech. And then we had a panel with the boutique gyms, so like the traditional bricks and mortar fitness players. So
we had Exponential. We had Exponential, and they've just launched X Pass, which is basically one pass to rule them all. We had Barry's, we had JJ from Barry's, president of Barry's, and then we also had Lauren from Forte. So, you know, really enabling businesses to stream live and on demand and integrating. There's a lot around aggregating, and there's a lot about being agnostic and
flexibility. I think JJ said on the panel, like the critical thing for his business is having the flexibility to offer his customers something everywhere. So
But there was also a resounding people want to come back. Like there's a face-to-face element, like we've seen with
as much as at events as there is in the actual gym space. So yeah, completely. So, and then this afternoon we have some different types of panels that bring in some of those other pillars that I talked about. So we have a session looking at sleep and mindfulness and nutrition and how that forms an integral part of the fitness market and the health market. So yeah, some interesting stuff to come as well.
One of the things I was interested in is your organisation obviously doesn't just focus on health and fitness. There's a number of elements from your organisation and where you focus. How do you guys define, I suppose, the fitness space? Like you've got some people that have traditional fitness facilities, but also there's a lot of people that have got nothing to do with that world. So how are you, in your event, like defining what health and fitness is now?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think we're going to see this evolve as we run this event each year. I think that the other elements, like looking at sleep and nutrition, are going to become more and more integral and more of an important part of holistic health. For me, the big movement in health is not just how you treat problems, it's more how you prevent and predict. And I think that brings in how well you sleep, how well you're, like what's your mental health, like what role does fitness play in that holistic health journey. So I think just incorporating all of those different factors. So I think it's going to really change. I think our audience next year will look quite different to this year, just with the new types of company.
Yeah. And then one more shout out on today, it's International Women's Day today when we're actually filming this, and you've actually built that within the construct of today as well. We've got Francesca Shula, we've got Adi Kapoor, we've got Amira, we've got Lauren from Forte. they're running actually an event within the event. So perhaps tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so we have a Women in Connected Health boardroom. It was application, so you had to apply to be part of that boardroom discussion, and it's just really like bringing to the fore the importance of women in the industry. And I think the reception has been phenomenal, to the point where we have a waiting list because there's only so many spaces. But yeah, I think it's a really important element.
And what's wondering, I mean, you know, we're trying to break the bias, and that's sort of the trend of this year. But when I look at those women, and I'm fortunate to know them personally, they are a ball of business people in their own right, and they've managed to really flourish and make things happen. And it's really encouraging to see people of that calibre like leading the fore in this area.
And also something that's been important on the programme, like we haven't just thought about having that as part of the event, but making sure we have a really diverse set of panellists, and not just obviously the women, but you know, like it's diversity in its truest form. And I think we have such a good representation of all different cultures and females, that we've got a really good balance across the day.
Well, Rhian, thank you so much for inviting us, and I'm looking forward to this afternoon, and wish you a lot of success.
Thank you, congratulations. Amazing.
Thank you.
Our final guest is no stranger to Escape Fitness, Natalia Karbasova, the founder of the FitTech Summit, the leading conference in Europe devoted to fitness technology and the future of well-being and active lifestyle.
Natalia, thank you for joining me today. You're making me feel very bad about our last interview that I was...
You should feel bad, that's true.
It was a great interview, and you did very well under my constant questioning.
Your supervision, you want to say.
My supervision, yeah. So what caused you to come all the way from Germany over to Los Angeles, apart from the sun?
Well, I want to get into the sun, and I wanted to have a look at what's happening in the United States, and that's an important market for us. And so that was just nice to see the people, to understand how you guys are thinking about the market, like what's coming up in the next years, and where the whole market is. And what I've seen so far, business models is like a super important thing that everybody's thinking about, but not anyone has solved just yet, I would say.
Right, you mean in terms of the way to make money from
exactly
the area? Okay, so it's only first day in, and there's a lot of presentations. But what do you feel now at the end of the first day? Like, what are the few things that stood out from today?
You want to know what I feel or what I think?
Well, I know you feel extremely tired because you've been up for God knows how long. But what are you thinking about some of the things that we talked about? Anything that stood out that surprised you, or just confirmation of what you were aware of before?
Look, I'm a big fan of Strava, and Michael Horvath was speaking at the FitTech Summit 2018 in Munich, and since then things developed further, right? What I love people thinking about is like, what does it take to have a great fitness community? And engagement is definitely number one, right? Because it's better to have like 100 members who are really happy with your product than 1,000 who are kind of half happy or probably not at all, right? And then it's just about the community building aspect, the engagement aspect, and kind of the aspect where you start charging money from your members, and where you think it's better to just start offering the free product just to gain the traction. So of course no one can solve that like for sure and forever, right? But I think that community as such and sense of belonging is something that we're going to be seeing way more often in the fitness space and FitTech space.
There was a lot of people coming into this space, developing apps, but there's a huge graveyard of people that have put a lot of money into it and failed. What's your views about that? You know, where do people think about playing in this area? Because it's new. It requires a huge amount of capital. A lot of development takes a lot longer than most people have ever imagined. And by the time they kind of get to where they think they are, the technology has moved on so much. Like one guy said, every 6 months there's huge jumps in it. So what are your thoughts for people that, particularly a lot of the audience that you're involved with? Where do they play in this space, or how can they make a decision about where to play in this space?
Wow, that's a super difficult question. I think this is just a general question on when you're kind of starting your own company. You need to understand what you're passionate about, because if you're not, that's just not going to work, right? What's like increasingly difficult is just bringing apps to the market and kind of try to market them in the app store and doing all this stuff, which just doesn't work anymore, right? You have to have some kind of personalization layer, which is, I mean, I'm sorry, this is like banal. This is not new, right? That's kind of obvious. But let's just look at the things that worked in the past. Like if we see Freeletics as a very successful app from Germany, which was kind of started 10 years ago with simple PDF training plans, right? Then kind of developed further and further, and they kind of created the market themselves, right? What they're doing now is, first of all, AI coaching, like personal engagement. They grew really, really strong with community, like physical community, where people were getting together and helping each other doing specific exercises, right? So this sense of belonging that I was mentioning before, it's still there. The next step that they're doing is kind of the home fitness market, where they're addressing it from the gamification perspective and strength training, what they call strength gaming perspective, right? And this is one thing. On the other hand, we have like apps as Zinc Coach, which is a very young company from Germany, which is also part of our network. They already have like 150,000 members, right? Which is not bad for a very young startup, right? And what they're doing is bringing this kind of Freeletics experience in a different way. So you have your own personal user journey with your own personal coach, which you can also see and kind of feel and have this guidance, which is also adjusted to the kind of coaching that you're looking for. For example, you can say, I want the coach to push me harder. I want the coach to be more playful. I want him or her to educate me better. So this is what we were speaking here at this event as well about, is that the fact that you can individualize every kind of training regardless of the target audience clustering. That was the case before. Because before that we were speaking about like, hey, those are beginners, those are couch potatoes, those are people with injuries, blah, 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 right? Today you can say he's not a beginner in terms of knowledge, but he's like really not motivated. Right. And this aspect and this criteria is something that you can consider today when building an app. So this thing with personalization, although I admit that does sound kind of, obvious, but it's getting there. It's getting really personalized in a way.
Personalization then, I suppose from what I've heard today in some of the sessions is that there's personalization as we thought it was, where you put in your details and then it responds to that information that you've given it. And there seems to be now a new level of personalization where as you're going through it, it's actually looking at you. So regardless of how you define yourself, whether I'm a male or a female and I'm this height, etc., it's this kind of computer, what is it called? Computer learning or something? Is it
machine learning?
Yeah, it was
in a way,
but through the
deep
camera.
Learning?
Yeah.
Oh, computer vision.
Computer vision seems to be able to say, well, okay, regardless of all of that, I'm actually seeing real time what's going on, and now I'm going to make recommendation through AI.
Look, it's the same thing if you've been in the media space and you're a content professional, right? So it's the same difference as between like print advertising in magazines, where you say like my target audience is this, and it's like females between 30 and 55, blah blah, who prefer the healthy lifestyle and so on and so forth, right? This is like what it was before. Now we have programmatic advertising, and it's being kind of targeted to each person individually in a way, right? And it's going to be getting even more personalized through tracking opportunities and all these things that are coming to the advertising space. So you can definitely compare that to what's happening in the fitness tech space on the side of individualization.
So Natalia, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. We will continue this interview, but for people who realize why it's been cut short, we've been kicked out essentially. So
well, that happens. That's life. Life happens.
Where can we see you next?
FIBO, FitTech Summit at FIBO in April in Cologne.
Fantastic. Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you, Matthew.
See you soon.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.